Okay, thank you.
A little bit higher. That's not a good thing.
I think that example is good.
I'll bring you. No, I forgot. I'll bring them Saturday.
Okay.
For this. Oh yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Yeah. Oh, it's fun.
I went to baseball game.
A lot of fun last year.
I'm gonna be with
You were
you.
there. Yeah, you were there. I've been to it every time.
Yeah, I've been
And
there.
I love it. There's the three of us.
Yeah, because I was at the baseball game.
I'm sure that was fun too, but
I'm gonna switch it up.
Yeah, yeah.
How neat that they have those books.
I know.
Is
there another baseball you go to? It wasn't always like that.
Exactly one that same night.
I've gone to that before when it's not completely with big class. It's not always been.
The boot is at the.
Oh, yeah.
And it's nice.
Yeah. Was that? Is that sound?
Yes.
No. Yeah, that would be, I think. I try to not have my presents known. They're fine.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to follow the script given by our town clerk. So the first thing we'll do is do the pledge of allegiance. So if you would please stand as one. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Today is Monday, July 19, 2022. This is a special Apex Town Council meeting being conducted in a hybrid format with one or more council members participating both in person and remotely. So similar to other town council meetings, there is public access to view portions of the meeting on the Town of Apex YouTube channel. So we'll begin this meeting by asking each council member to identify yourself. We can make a record of who's present. Councilmember Yan.
Here.
Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Gray. All right, let the record show he's absent for the meeting. Councilmember Mackey. Here. Councilmember Stallings.
Here.
All right, record reflects 4 members of council are present participating in the meeting. So the purpose of today's special meeting is to consider various location and aesthetics for an additional elevated water tank and discuss the status of town's Big Branch pump station, of course, main design project. Additionally, council will enter into a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 to consider qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of individual public officer. Council members, please note there are various documents in front of you. You should have those documents ready and available. And the first one is elevated water tank PowerPoint, product summary table or legal size paper, and the town of Big Branch pump station, of course, main design project PowerPoint. And then map for option 3 and 4. So we'll go ahead and begin at this time. Any questions before we proceed? All right, we'll turn it over to Michael Deaton. All right, for the additional elevated water tank.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, administration, team, and all the support staff that helped us get this work session together today. I do appreciate that. Today we have 2 important projects to discuss. They are capital improvement projects, and they both deal with water and sewer. These projects are very significant to the town maintaining its current level of service, staying in compliance with state regulations, and being able to continue to meet our fire flow requirements be able to handle the daily variations of our tanks and also be able to support the future growth that we suspect will be occurring in the future. The first project we have is a 1.5 million gallon elevated water tank. And we've hired the Wooten company to help us evaluate potential sites and come up with a recommendation of both the tank site and the tank style. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David Bennett with the Wooten company, and he can present on the elevated water tank. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Council, for inviting us into this workshop. Now, the Police Department conducted on a new 1.5 million gallon elevated water tank. If you go through this, please feel free to stop me if any questions or comments come up. So the first thing, part of the evaluation was determining the purpose, setting some design criteria. We need to evaluate the general purpose of this was the town. When looking at growth, the current growth that we're seeing and the future growth anticipated, we really need more storage. We really need to have that storage a little more spread out throughout the town. The criteria that were established initially was running the water model the town has for their existing water distribution system. We determined that we need 1.5 million gallons of water storage, and we need to maintain the water elevation in that tank to be equal to the existing tanks. Now we will help distribute. Big, broad points. One, proximity to growth areas. Where are we growing? Where do we need this extra storage? So we look at the water model. Where does that show we need a tank? Where's the extra pressure needed? Where's extra storage needed in the system? And then, where can we put the tank? One of the important things here is just because it's technically the best place doesn't mean that it's feasible.
Can you go back real quick and sort of describe why being spread out matters? I don't quite understand the science of water tank storage.
Yeah, so when you put water storage, the elevated water storage, we were sort of through a pipe into every house throughout the town. And as opposed to the pipe, the farther it runs, the less pressure is available. So you're losing pressure that runs through the lines. So if we spread those tanks out and the system's all connected, then we can boost that pressure essentially along throughout town. As the tanks are spread out.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is there a model of where we're lacking pressure or we'd like to have more pressure today, or is this more about where it's going to be in 10 or 15 years?
So I think it's a little bit of both. The current water model the town maintains, and it's not run by us, I don't think. But so we were given that information in general areas of need.
We're currently working on a long-range water resources plan, which is a separate project that will project our water use needs for 50 years out into the future. So we'll be hearing about that. I'm sure that it will show that we need another tank pretty badly.
Another tank beyond this one. Being proposed.
I was referencing this.
By 2050, yes, sir.
Eventually, yeah.
It's your tank's volume is related to your average data demand. So as your average data demand goes up, you need more volume in the air.
One other thing to note with that is firefighting capabilities. think about Jordan Point and how far away that part of town is from our tanks up here, attention tank being closest. Say we put this tank closer to Jordan Point, now we've got 1.5 million gallons that much closer to those homes, those residences, that general area. As it grows, we've got more water just closer to them in order to.
The pressure discussion, you were just saying that Jordan Point's lower than these areas are. So is it just distance, or is it distance and also how far it drops?
Right. So the elevation actually helps. The lower you get, the higher the pressure.
Yeah.
So in sighting the tank, pressure isn't as big of a factor, just because as you go toward, I mean, we've got extremely high pressures down there. So the pressure aspect isn't as important, I guess, for us in our system as the fire flow rate. Other, Cary or Raleigh, they site their tanks a lot more based on those pressure needs, whereas just how our elevations, contours, and everything is in Apex, we don't necessarily have that big.
You think we might though someday? Like if we have one system and part of town's up here, part of town's down here, as this town grows, has more demand for water, more demand for pressure, isn't they gonna hurt the pressure of the people up here?
The lowest pressures in town are around downtown. That's the peak.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, won't that get worse over time as Jordan Point area expands?
So we have so many elevated tanks around that area already that should hold those static pressures pretty constant. One thing that could cause it to perform a little more poorly is if our pipes age and they lose some of their capacity. But for the most part, as long as we maintain good healthy lines, the tanks where they are now should serve the areas.
Do towns ever differentiate their systems and like have two different systems for a high elevation, low elevation? I guess at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had investigated years back, splitting our water system into two pressure zones. So central pressure zone, and out toward the lake where pressures are high, we're going to have a western pressure zone. So drop the pressures out there. It's got some benefits. As far as maintenance, it's usually easier to maintain pipes that aren't 140 psi, really high. But we stayed away from splitting our systems because we think it's fine how it is, and we learned some lessons from the town of Cary when they split their pressure system that it's a big headache to do that because you've got a big customer base out there in the western part of our service area that's used to having these high pressures. So as soon as you turn them down a little bit, even though we'll be giving them plenty of pressure, you're gonna get a lot of complaints. They're gonna notice. Their sprinklers aren't gonna reach all the way across the area.
So essentially, as long as we maintain our ability to keep our tanks full, which means our water resource, our supply coming from the Cary Apex treatment plant, which their long-range study is going to probably identify that we're going to need another connection. Right now, we basically have two. It will probably identify the need to bring on a third connection. So it's about supply and ability to keep that tank full. As long as you can keep the tank elevations full, your pressures ride off the tank. So if you can't keep the tanks full and all the water coming in has to go out to the system and it doesn't make it into the tank, then your pressures fall. So we're not going to let that happen. They're not going to let that happen.
I believe it.
Like we said, majority, this is a map showing the sites that were evaluated on the 540 and then the line with all the sites, most of the sites on down in South Salem. So most of our growth is moving out towards the west. And that's kind of where our focus was. Here's site 5. That's the Hunter Street Fire Department. And that site was selected when we had the land available and the town already owned it. So we had the evaluation. But as we go down South Salem, the sites 1A and 1B are associated with Apex Speedway extension. So there's already construction going on there. There's already work there. Site 2 is where the Apex Barbecue in South Salem. that corner next to Depot 499 development, which is the reason there, that site is available. Sites 3A and 3B, both adjacent to Depot 499 in that development area. And site 4 is up by Pleasant Park. It's the furthest out to the west.
Are the solid lines here the current water mains?
So the solid lines are existing water mains. The dashed lines are proposed water mains. You'll notice there's dash line from the Pleasant Park. Actually, that's been installed now. So there is a water main heading there. So that gives that a little boost to that area. But in general, like I said, we're going towards the west southwest. So looking back at the sites, we all have personal preferences. Maybe just looking at this, you instantly pick the one that you like. But to look at this a little more objectively, we established a set of criteria. One is water availability. If you can't fill the water tank up, you can't put the water out. The site will not work without additional work. Stormwater infrastructure. If we ever need to drain the tank for maintenance or any other reason, it's good to have a location that has somewhere to send the water. FAA and FCC requirements. These are going to come into play based on tank height and proximity to airports, which we're kind of south of RDU, but it's still going to come into play. Tank height, as we mentioned, we set the elevation to match the other tanks, but as we move further southwest on South Salem, the site elevations drop, which means the taller tank. And what kind of site work is going to be required? Are we already working at the site, or are we going to have to take a virgin site and kind of develop it ourselves just for this project? And next year for Mission Town GDO, like what kind of screenings involved, what setbacks would be required? A big one is purchase price and availability. Town already owns the site, that's great. You can't buy it, that's okay. And if we have to condemn it, that's very low score. And then any adjacent property concerns. This is has the potential to be a point of a lot of pride for the town and for the community. And so we want to make sure everybody's happy with where we've done it.
Actually, about this criteria, I had a comment too, but like, is the we, Apex, and Wooten together coming up with this, or just you guys, or what?
A little bit of both. I mean, these are typical criteria that's looked at when you site a new tank. I think Wood probably came up with the majority of them when we looked at it.
Okay, just a comment, I guess. Maybe it could be considered in the adjacent property concerns, but when I was looking at that map, I noticed some. So I live nearby, so I kind of know that area very well. There's some like areas I'm really excited about their future development, especially around Depot 499. And so the opportunity cost to go in that spot would be tremendous, I think, not just the purchase price, or but like what we're not going to get. And that didn't seem to be in here versus like the fire department one, the Pleasant Park one, it's just going to be grass or something probably. So it's not going to be necessarily, we're not giving up very much besides just grass. So I thought that should have been maybe in the future, like that could be consideration is like how it's zoned right now and like what it might be used for.
And it is, right? Like that would feed in the purchase price. Like there's a huge opportunity cost. Then that parcel is going to be 2 million versus a parcel that's next to a bridge will be, 200K or something.
It may be in that.
Indirectly. Yeah.
Indirectly. I mean, I think for that Depot 499, the commercial, which is what that corner lot is zoned as, is probably for the residents a higher desirability for it to be developed in like an office, for example. And like the mixed use part in Depot 499, I think is very high desirability to have because it's so intense versus some of the other ones. But it's just a comment about the future doing this again, maybe.
So Councilman, in the back of the packet, we have another table that once we get to the end of this presentation, we go over, but it's more of those type of concerns or thoughts that maybe not considered heavily in the engineering world, but may be more so the town goal itself.
I missed that. Oh,
We've got some stuff very interesting to go through.
Okay. Cool.
So as you can guess, all those criteria are not weighted equally. They're not equally important in this discussion. Some of the more important ones we saw were water availability, the height of the tank, what site work is going to be required, the purchase price, and then adjacent property concerns for probably the largest consideration here. When we look at those, site number 4, which is Pleasant Park, was one that scored the highest, based primarily on the water availability and purchase price. The screen of the adjacent property concerns scored a little bit lower here, just because I think there's a little bit of maybe discussions around the park placement in general. And it's currently under construction. It's just a lot going on this time. But site 4 is also going to require the tank to be the tallest, which will put it over 200 feet, which will require approval from the FAA. And the FAA has the ability to require some additional work there. We don't anticipate anything too crazy, but they're likely to require a light just as an identifier. But they could also have a worst case scenario require maybe certain paving schemes that may eliminate the site from consideration. But we've applied the FAA online to the site to see what requirements they'll have. They haven't responded yet. They run, I think, 6 weeks to get a response back according to the website. So we will keep the updated on that.
So a couple things. And there's something wrong with me, but like on the second to last column there, second to last row, 5 times 15 is 75, not 125. And that changes the ranking of the tanks.
This was an old table.
Yeah, that was my second point, is the table that's in the report they emailed us is actually different in a couple of key ways, right?
So this,
Right, it has a 5,
yeah, this one, this was a preliminary.
adjacent property concerns.
Sure.
Which ultimately, I think it makes the 340 and 360. I just saw that video.
Makes it 310. Right.
Well, there was some additional changes. I think that we had the adjacent property concerns was changed some.
Okay. So moving on from that though, like slides aside, how tall are the water tanks around us? Don't tell us.
130-ish, 125-ish, something that much.
And in the water tank industry, you know, you guys probably have conferences and stuff, talk about this, so like what's a normal, really big, like what's the industry kind of standard for a height? Like, I guess what I'm saying is, will 200 feet be like freakishly large, or will it be what you tend to see sometimes?
Would not be out of the range of goal.
Okay. What's the consequence of getting the height off by a couple feet? I know they have to be equal, so it drains. If one tower ends up because of settling or construction 10 feet lower than another, is that a catastrophe, or is that just a
So
slip?
also it'll do the same to the lowest.
So it's really bad if they're off by a few feet.
Impact the storage.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned earlier that pressure is already higher in this area. If we went with site 4, would we be at risk of increasing the pressure too much? Because I have to say, since I bought my house, my pressure release valve, I live in this area. I went out once, I lost 2 relief tanks in my house. Is there any chance the town owes me like $100 because the pressure's too high? No. But more directly, like, is it a problem if we're increasing the pressure with another tank? The pressure's already high in the area.
Well, the tank heights are all the same. That 16 is,
But the horizontal
Elevation.
distance to a tank will decrease, not gonna increase the pressure.
right, it won't. They're all the same height, so the same pressure. Now, what this will help with is residual pressure. So when, like, we talk about power flow, when water's being pulled, this will help the pressure to stay higher than what it would be if it had to come all the way from downtown Apex.
Oh, I see.
So really, all the tanks are at the same, you know, we took a map, you know, like a contour map, all the tanks across town would be the same elevation. Some would be here at 120, 130 feet tall, and some down there maybe 200 feet, 210 feet tall, whatever it may be. But, you know, we talk about the system as a whole, it's all the same hydraulic grade, that 616 elevation. So that keeps pressure consistent throughout town, but higher in the lower areas.
So the static condition in the middle of the night, the pressure will not change at all. During the middle of the day with a fire in Jordan Point or multiple fires down there, so you're having to move a lot of water, the pressure would not drop as much. They would have a fire flow residual because they would have a tank closer to them feeding that water.
The pressure is only applicable water levels.
Got it.
Has a big effect on the amount of water. Not the pressure of water.
With the adjacent, are we done?
Yep.
With the adjacent property concerns, was that based on current density?
Off the town's GIS.
Okay.
And planned.
But not planned?
No.
Because
Number of residential parcels.
there's a ton of units planned for Depot 499, of which several of these are right nearby. That would probably change the numbers. And they're building it right now. It's not there, but they're building it. So you should think about the future, right?
Well, I mean, if you build it before they get there,
Right.
the complaints are different than if you build it after they.
So if we were to build a tank today near the Peakway project,
Yeah.
if people live there already, they're gonna not be, they won't be happy that we're bringing a new tank to there. However, if it's already built and now that surrounding area is built around it, people know, hey, there's a tank already there. If I buy this house, see that tank. So it's
Okay. And
it's about the most subjective way we
the number of people that are going to see that anything at Depot 499 is going to be a lot of people are going to look at it eventually. They may move in after, so they may know it. And that might be fine, but a lot of people are going to see it.
Johnson maybe for that sense.
Ideally, a lot of people are going to see it in Pleasant Park. They just may not live.
But they would live there.
They won't live there. Yeah.
So here's visualization of Pleasant Park and where we propose to put the site, the tank. It would be right there by the entrance, right where the water main comes in. It would essentially provide a landmark at the entrance to the park. I did talking one of the people describing where to go. For the water tank. There is potential for other sites at the park. I think it's the best one we look at. But if we wanted to, there's potential moves to northern, go along corner, or maybe not the next island. If there's some other reason to do that, really, that's the spot that we're recommending. Okay, so the second criteria, or the second thing we evaluated was solid tank install. Those are 4 styles, the multi-tank the town has now. We do 3 downtown tanks. Composite tank, which is basically a concrete center column, steel tanks on top. Hydro pillar, similar, but it's a steel column with steel tank on top. And then a sphere. Again, we looked at objective criteria. These capital cost to install, what's it going to cost to maintain, how does it look? The new ones are like probably interior space. What else can we do in that area? We need to just fence it off and block that area away. And then communication for how long? Is it available to lease out for cell phone tower? Okay. And life cycle, let's put some of that stuff together. So again, these are not equal criteria, and we weighted those accordingly. Notice the cost was about 70% of the evaluation here. And then the composite tank one here was the highest scoring by a good bit. Mostly because it's the cheapest to install. The second lowest maintenance cost, which led to the lowest 20-year life cycle cost. It also offered something, the interior space. You can have some options to do with there.
Was there an attempt to marry the location with the one about the interior space that matters more when it's maybe at a park versus by itself? Right? It seems like to me.
It could. It can be used for just about anything. We wanted to have have a remote EMS station there. It could be a garage. If you wanted to put somewhere else, you could have, store anything you wanted to. So, you need storage, you need some kind of remote buildings, throughout town, otherwise.
Okay.
At a park, might offer some extra benefits.
Yeah.
There's still benefit everywhere. And then too, when we look at these tanks, some of these numbers might change, and take a totally different side.
There's no height problems, all these options can go up to any height easily. What you said?
No, so the height becomes the consideration. If you had a really short tank, like you do maybe downtown, the multi-leg becomes a little bit cheaper. So maybe that was 4 or 5 instead of 4. But the height that we're looking at is about 240 feet. The deposit is the cheaper one. Now your maintenance costs, for a multi-leg even downtown, is the higher ground elevations. It's still going to be the lowest, the highest cost, of course. So there would be, depending on the site, there could be some little changes. And that's kind of why we looked at the site first, and then we can kind of use that to guide our next list. So for recommendations, you see the little blue circle on the map of Pleasant Park. That is the roughly the size of the deposit tank. You can see the footprint.
Is that the base or the top?
That's the top. That's the top of the tank. It's about 87 feet. And so this is a rendering of kind of what that deposit tank would look like with the new things logo on. And essentially we could do paint anything or do a vinyl wrap, paint design if you want to do. So if you want anything you want to call out to be part of the design process, put any kind of logo or pictures. If you look around and Google searches and you can see kind of crazy things with lights and painting, water things.
Are any concerns about consistency across our water tanks, or is that just a little too? To me, to think if we got a bunch of multi-leg ones now, why aren't we getting another one?
We talked about that. I have a slide on this. But yeah, it's really not a concern there. What this is showing is really, it's site specific. There are times when maybe we would recommend a multi-leg tank, like you have now. But we're moving out of town. It's a new location. And the consistency is not like you're seeing the 3 tanks that you do now. This will be all by itself. I'm just good from the aesthetics standpoint.
So my wife, who's not here, doesn't matter, but like she's big on design. She thought, I asked that very question to her. What she thought, she said, if it's in close proximity to the ones that already exist, it seems like having them the same would be more important than if it's kind of farther away like this is. It was her opinion. I thought that was a pretty good argument. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, it'd be a much stronger argument. It would still probably be more expensive over years, but there'd be a strong argument there that aesthetically, it's not that treasure. It's not food related knowledge. Yeah. Along with that, you do have the multi-legs now, and this would be a change.
I'm saying public art.
The advantages of the deposit tank, kind of there's this a little bit, but it's a lower capital cost, lower maintenance cost. You have a concrete column there. There's no maintenance. Not having to go out and paint that on a regular basis. You still have to maintain the steel tank. That would still have to be painted and coated on a regular basis like you do now. But you eliminate that extra painting of the leg. Also, let's see, it gives you some additional uses like we kind of talked about. You're looking at about a 50-foot diameter column. There's potential here for office space, conference space, storage, towns doing remote fire stations, EMS stations, police stations. You can use here. A standard tank with no really nothing extra on it still comes with overhead doors. You still clearly room to drive trucks in. The maintenance on the pumps, the piping, or just for storage, or for a remote fire truck. Some other things to note, we have notes on, but And then you can notice in the picture, the stairwell inside, you're not climbing up a ladder outside in the weather. You're in a building climbing a staircase. So the safety, you get much higher safety. Any piping or any of the communication throughout wiring, that all comes through that central column. There's not wires hanging up the side of the building, out the side of the tank. So aesthetically, again, it's a much cleaner look and modern look. In response to how we changing tank style, and the city of Raleigh has all 4 tanks that we evaluate. And it's based on a case by case basis. The what works best in this location. Kind of carry has the multi-leg behind the steroid tanks. What works best. One thing to note here is Raleigh's deposit tank on the far right, top right. It's a big center column with a little tank on top. But they use that for their reuse water. So if they ever want to put a bigger tank on there, in this case, they can just take that tank down and raise a bigger tank on it. So it gives them a little, I won't say modularity, but it gives them some options in the future as they grow. But it's not uncommon to see a town with multiple styles of tanks at all. We pick Raleigh and Cary because they're close, because that's the same thing with any other city. So finally, I kind of want to give a little comparison. Your tension road tank is 1.5 million gallons. It's shorter than we're talking about, 30, 40 feet. And versus on the right, the look there, how much cleaner or modern the deposit tank looks. I think really kind of aesthetically throughout home is that point. And also, we have the communication grill on top of the multi-leg tank. You see here, you see it forever. On the composite tank, it's hardly noticeable. Well, that,
Thank you so much. Anything? Done?
I'm no.
Okay.
Did you want to go over that table that was in the back of that packet? Just to talk about one of the things that hasn't been discussed yet, the FAA potential requirements. I don't know how your thoughts may change if we had to paint that tank a checkerboard orange color. That may be an FAA requirement. That's to be determined. I believe, David, you may have the latest information about that, but.
Other than that, I haven't heard back from the FAA yet. Yeah, we've submitted the application and we're still waiting to hear back.
So you see those types of tanks, there's some near PTI in Greensboro, Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point, they're all over the place. Worst case would be, yes, the entire bowl has to be that checkerboard, which I think, at least in our opinion, would probably be a deal killer. Alternatively to that, it could just be lighting. It could just be that checkerboard is painted of the tank, which you wouldn't be able to see from the ground level. But that is something that David said, whatever 5-6 weeks, we're waiting on an answer of what they're going to actually require, just due to proximity to.
That is ugly. That's not that tall. The one in the picture we got here.
It's just close. It has to deal with
Proximity.
horizontal
Okay.
distance to their towers.
And did you say all of our sites might be impacted that, or just certain sites? Or is it still up in the air based on what?
So sites 3, 3A, 3B, and 4 would all have the tank over 200 feet, which requires the FAA to review the plans. And they have the option of requiring either no changes or no requirements, all the way up to you painting the whole tank to be visible to aircraft. Their guidance and their regulations give a horizontal vertical distance from the nearest airport, the nearest runway, as to what they consider to be in the flight path or not in that for RDU. There's a couple of private airports in town that we would be kind of considered in their flight path, but they're not listed on FAA's website. So I don't know if the FAA considers those to be and FAA had recognized the airport or not. If there are any grass runways in people's backyards, essentially.
The likelihood, and for council and mayor, I'm Charlie Davis with the Whoop Company as well. Many of these projects where we run into FAA and proximity to airports, especially one of the Raleigh tanks that we showed, the spheroid tank was in the flight path near RDU, just like we're on the south side of RDU. But likely what would be expected would be a light on top. And depending on whether that light may be a constant light or it could be a strobing light. It all depends on, as has been mentioned, could be for flight path, anything related to the aerial traffic that could be coming by. So at a minimum, probably expectation of a light. Where it's located relative to the airport and flight path, the likelihood, and again, I'm glad it's been mentioned that it could happen, but the expectation is they would not require the painting pattern on there, but you could expect probably at a minimum a light or something of that nature, just so it's clear that you have an expectation. Again, 200 feet in the air, that's only really noticeable to folks who are in the air, and you see them on towers all the way around town. Anything from white to a red light, depending on what FAA would require. So gives you some proximity of what that might look like. I did want to make one other comment. Mainly, I've actually been fortunate to do a lot of work with the tension tank where we had the co-locates. And what that is all the communication towers that are on top. I was involved with pretty much about every one of them that were put there. One of the things that I want to make sure that you saw in your packet is with a legged tank, to get from the ground to the top of the tank, you are mounting on the exterior of the legs. So while, and these are usually large cables, and they usually have some sort of shield or shroud around them. If you will go by that tank and notice, you will see these protected devices and trying to really hide it. But in the leg tank, that's the only option you've got. In the tank that we've presented for you today, and considering that co-locates, it does bring revenue to the town, you can still mount those on top of that composite tank. But the beauty of the composite tank is you run all of those cables, they're exposed, but they're on the interior of the column. And then what you do in the planning phase is you actually make up where the tank is, you enlarge the center column with the expectations of the maximum amount that you can serve up through it. And so basically what I'm getting at is you're able to hide a lot of the aesthetic things that you now have on your current tanks with that type of design, which I think knowing the location and if it does move forward at the park, I think that would be important. If you had aerials put on top, you're able to have an opportunity to control that and manage that much greater than any other style of tank. I just wanted to mention that just so it had some clarity into some of those pictures that we provided. Thank you.
In looking through that summary table, is there anything else that comes out that you want to discuss or?
Just clarification. So regardless of what tank that we put here, if we decide this is the place, if they decide it does have to be this orange checkerboard, regardless of what they choose, it's going to be orange checkerboard. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a factor of the height and the location.
I was gonna say too, could it be green to go with these other colors? Did we have any input on that? We'll wait and see what they say.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, if they record a checkerboard, why did they record in our existing tanks that we have today?
Height.
Height. Primarily height. We're like, all right. And proximity.
So it's not elevation, it's height from ground. Or elevation from sea level.
If you're an aircraft taking off, you're worried about the height, not necessarily the actual elevation.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's not likely. I mean, we should just assume that it's not going to happen. And if it does happen, come back and revisit.
The other thing to mention is from the FAA point of view, take out the idea of even, let's say the RDU was much farther away from us. If we still were looking at a 200-foot plus tank, the FAA still comes into play because the 200-foot elevation is the breakpoint of where they clearly look at having navigation devices added to the top or something related. because there's flight paths all over, US. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that it's color related, but the height of 200 feet is sort of a break point, and that would be constant for any tank, anywhere, where FAA has, jurisdiction over. Elevation is going to dictate, and then that elevation and proximity to a given airport flight path brings in additional items for consideration.
That's any structures. So
Yeah.
a tower, a simple
It's very
tower,
similar, to any type of elevator tower.
any structure over 200 feet.
I got one more question that occurred to me since you're talking about putting a tank in a park. How concerned are you guys about people flying their drones accidentally into this thing, or RC planes or helicopters or something? Because it's probably gonna be a popular spot people can go flying.
Whatever it's taking.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But typically, with your multi-leg tanks you have now, that whole area is fenced off underneath them. And depending on how you choose to use that into your space or the space underneath the top of the tank, you wouldn't necessarily, if they crash, under your engine brood tank, they've lost their drone. They can't get in there to get it. Yeah. So we're gonna take less of a footprint. Maybe it'll be better for the drone pilots, but as far as the water tank is concerned.
You wouldn't necessarily have to have the same fencing around this because your access is on the inside of the columns. Your doors on the outside are locked versus our tanks here, we have fences around them to keep people from gaining access to the ladder.
It provides a little extra security as well.
And if I may, one more point, I apologize, but I think it's just important for you to consider. And this is the same, whether it's the composite tank or you saw the all steel column tank, and even the spirally tank, those two that have an extended column. There's an advantage to any of those styles because it puts all of the operating piping, valving, everything that your town staff would have to get to, it puts it at workable height. If the three existing tanks that you got, all of those devices are mounted in a vault, I'm sure that falls within confined space operating criteria of what the town would have from a safety standpoint. The advantage of any of those styles, and especially the composite, you open up that space, you make it all at operator height, which eliminates need necessarily maybe for freeze protection. Definitely eliminates the need for confined space entry or anything like that, and makes it more accessible for maintenance and operations. So that's another benefit. We showed it kind of having multi-uses of space and storage and different things. The primary benefit is it puts your operating devices readily available to your staff, and that is an advantage from an operations standpoint. It is safe. Yes.
Sound safety, economics, maintenance, operational, those are all positives.
Yes. Thank you.
Security.
Would you say that, it sounds sort of like the community industry, whatever, is moving away from the multi-leg tanks? Is that accurate? For these reasons you said? Are they becoming less common?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the composite is the more modern style.
Okay.
But there's still places for the multi-leg.
Sure, right.
I would say it really depends on the size of the tank. And the size we're talking about, 1.5 million, is really large relative to most tanks. The smaller diameter tanks, 500, 750, maybe up to 1 million. The legged tanks are still the most cost effective, and that's why you see them predominantly. If you notice elevated tanks, that's what you see predominantly. When you start getting to 1 million gallons and higher, these type tanks, whether it's the hydro pillar or the composite, which we're recommending today, they become more cost effective for construction. And then, as we've mentioned, they definitely become more acceptable from a life cycle cost because you're reducing the amount of square footage of steel. It has to be painted, and that's a significant cost moving forward. So a lot of times they're all competitive. All of these tanks are competitive, but what really sets them apart is what is the size that you need for your application and what works best. So none of these are being phased out. They're all competitive. It's what is most attractive for the application that you got. Here, we're talking about 1.5 million. That's a very large tank relative to your standard code.
Hey, Marty, I think if we go with the park one, do they have an idea? Could they use that interior space for stuff if it's put in the park? I mean, if we go with this recommendation, and they looked at it and said, oh, we could put equipment or use it somehow.
I would recommend that storage to be for, yes, they could use it, but I actually did a study for the town about 15 years ago. and on the fire department. And we were looking at doing a composite tank with a fire department on the inside of Tension Road tank. The reality of that, it seems like a great idea, but it's a really expensive option. Cheaper to build a building than you are to try to make the inside of that tank a habitable space because it's very damp in there, right? You got a big water bowl over the top of it.
Yeah.
So typically, so it's more of a true functioning storage of, stuff. Like I could, a lot of places I see water resources will put extra pumps and stuff like that, things that they want secured. Now the weather, they put those in there, but not so much as, they don't normally put people.
But the parks may have.
Parks may have equipment and stuff that they can put in there, absolutely. But yeah, so you want to consider what you're putting in there too, because again, you've got the water source there. And it's not so much, you'll get cross contamination when you get people have, you don't want to store certain materials that would be bad inside of there because people will associate that with water and I don't care how you try to separate it, they won't be able to separate it. So.
Do like a fire station wouldn't be that great with railroad tracks right there, only one way across.
I just heard people talk about, I think when we had the Pleasant Park thing, they were talking about, or the master plan, they're talking about a need for storage for our parks in general. We don't have enough storage at our parks.
Yes, it can be used for various things based on where there's building material or whatnot that they may have that they can use.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that. Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? Mr. D?
That's everything we had.
Thanks so much for the presentation.
Need a motion from us, right?
Possible motion to approve.
Yeah.
You going for it?
I really thought they were gonna build it next to the Peakway Bridge. We discussed it like a year ago or something, I'd move approval of the recommendation, Pleasant Park, Pleasant Tank.
Motion second. Any further discussion before you vote?
Audra, we're just talking about possibility of some public art in that spot on that tank, possibly considering its location. So if we go this route, I think we should kind of think about, can we incorporate that into the design somehow, or at least make sure it's ready for it eventually.
I think the whole column issue is right.
I mean, I think bright colors, I don't know, it might be too much, but I think it'd be awesome.
Well, it is the entryway to Pleasant Park, right?
Yeah.
This will be visible partially at the top point. But the top of the tank would be.
Top of the tank.
Definitely will.
There'd be the picture of the tank away. Essentially advertising for the town or the park.
Yeah.
People won't have any problem finding the park.
That's good.
And y'all will think about a decision that y'all made maybe a year or so ago that made this possible when Water Resources came to you and said, hey, we really think we need to change the encasement size up under the railroad because we believe this may be an opportunity in the future for this very thing to put a water tank there. So that's Mike and his team thinking ahead and looking out for the future. So.
I just have one quick question. I don't think it matters as much, but you were part of the Tension Road. And I guess
Good or bad?
no, it's good. It's good. I guess from a town perspective, with community, I mean, was there much pushback? I don't remember.
No, sir, none that I remember. That was a tight site, but I don't recall any concerns from the public when we were putting that in.
Thank you. All right, we got a motion second. All right, we'll go to
It's to go through recommendations, to clarify. That's the motion.
Yes.
The park and the type.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to do each location. Is that what we're doing? If we don't want to do, or we just actually make it to park as a location.
I think the motion was Pleasant Park and Composite Tank.
Correct.
Yeah, motion was with recommendation.
All right, we'll go to roll call vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Mayor Pro Tem Killingsworth.
Aye.
Great. Councilmember Gann.
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Aye. Excited, but yeah.
Thanks.
We'll move now to Allocated Branch Pump Station Enforcement Main Design Project. That is on Dr. B.
It's a new improved mic.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Matt Eccles with the Water Resources Department. I'm a senior utility engineer. Working with Mike and Jamie on the Big Branch 2 pump station in Fort. This is a 4.3 million gallon per day capacity pump station with fuel with 20-inch force mains to pump from pump station site to our Western Lake Regional Water Reclamation. It's about a 5-mile route to get from the pump station to the wastewater plant. Current cost estimate is between 25 and 30 million. That does not include land acquisition costs.
It's not.
There's a little more on that in a second. That's sort of what we're here to talk about. So this is just an overview map of our sewer system. These, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes. These red lines up here are our existing gravity sewer lines. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we currently provide sewer service. The Big Branch 2 pump station that we're talking about today is right down here, south of the interchange between US 1 and 540. We are pumping it from here through two 20-inch force mains to this yellow star over here, which is the Western Lake Water Reclamation Facility. To give you an idea of the scale of this project related to the rest of the town, this shaded green area here is everything this is the sewer shed for this pump station. So everything in this green shaded area can flow by gravity to the Big Branch pump station, Big Branch 2 pump station. So serve all this. There's a lot of undeveloped land here. This is Pleasant Park. There's some previous development, Salem Village neighborhood. It would also take this Salem Village pump station offline and allow us to decommission that. Additionally, the red shaded area here is what is served by the Big Branch 1 future pump station. We're not working on that presently, but the Big Branch 1 pump station and the Big Branch 2 pump station do share the force main to Western Lake. So essentially, this project is serving both the red and the green shaded areas of town, including four existing pump stations that will be able to decommission. Mostly what we want to discuss today is our options with regards to the force main routing. How we're going to get this 5-mile long pipe from our pump station to our Western Lake facility. When we're routing force mains, it's a pressurized line, so we can send it left, right, up, down, anywhere we can. It doesn't have to follow grade or maintain grade or anything like that. Gravity sewer lines. So we're trying for the shortest distance and also to minimize environmental impacts, private property impacts, and costs. Look at, this is US 1 going right down here. Pretty good approximation of a straight line between our points A and B. So our number one choice for this force main right off the bat was to install it in the right of way of the US 1 corridor. We also looked at several other options, including some that are south of US 1 and some, this one up here would be in easements side of US 1. So we narrowed it down during the preliminary engineering phase to these two alternatives. It's kind of hard to see, but that green line there is roughly what it would be if we're able to install it in the US 1 right away. The purple line is the next best thing to that, installing an easements just outside of the right of way. And down here, we're able to do that pretty well, but there are a couple of spots where there are structures or other obstructions right up against the right of way, so we don't have room to squeeze an easement and two force mains in between the right of way line and the obstruction. Hopefully that'll make a little more sense on some of these maps. But this is essentially our option that we're left with if we're not allowed to use the US 1 corridor. We've tried, we've put in a good deal of effort trying to convince DOT to allow us to locate in that right of way. US 1 in that area is a controlled access way, so their policy is to not allow parallel installations of utilities within those controlled access right of ways. So we met with them back in September, early in the preliminary engineering phase, and we had a virtual meeting with them, and then following that, per their direction, we submitted a formal variance request asking them to allow us to install it in the right of way. That was denied in November. We appealed that denial to the division engineer, who also very quickly denied the appeal by an email. We since then we've started focusing on field surveys to get a better idea of what exactly those hazards are, or not hazards, obstacles are, and how well we can line this force main up without having an impact to the properties, assuming that we're not going to get into the use right. We've also had discussions that internally and with some property owners that are stakeholders that we kind of think we could take it up the chain a little more with DOT. But it's.
Is there a way you could say, like, we'll assume future costs or something, like try to take away their liability financially or otherwise, like to be able to do that? If we just assume they're never going to widen that road or whatever the problem is here, I'm not quite sure what the problem is. Like, is there a way we can just say, we'll hold you not liable in the future, and if you'll approve it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so, and to answer your first question, we did show this encroachment feasibility assessment we've given them that shows that there is plenty of room in the right of way for our two force mains, even assuming they add a lane in that thoroughfare. So they have plenty of room, and we feel like it's a reasonable request, and we'll get into the benefits soon, but it would save us a lot of time and a lot of impacts to private property.
To add to that, if we did install it in the right of way, in years down the road, they widen the road and it's in conflict and have to be relocated, we would legally be required, most likely at that point, to pay for it, the town to put the bill to pay for it to be relocated anyway.
What's the big deal then?
Well, that's the condition of any
Yeah.
encroachment.
It's their policy. Controlled access is no.
They cited safety concerns with construction going on, open trenches on the side of US 1 because the speeds are high. They gave us a whole list of reasons. But we
This designation of controlled access, is that like old US 1, US 1, 64? Like what kind of roads have that designation? Because
The exits, right?
yeah, controlled access means
Right, nothing inside of that. Now, It's usually the larger roads. I don't know if it's speed limit that dictates that, but it's usually, I mean, like all interstates are that way. Parts of 64 probably are, maybe not through town, but maybe some of the more remote areas, but definitely this part of US 1.
So proceeding with the installing the force main and easements. We want to still stay as close to the US 1 corridor as we can, but there are a few places where these red stars here have some things that make that difficult. So here's one example. This is at the end of Bosco Road. This yellow line here, this is the right of way line for this one. So they close come in here. Ideally, we want to have an easement just outside of this right of way. But here, we have a little trouble because of how close some of these structures are to the right of way. So we've got, in this case, we've got a horse ring that we right adjacent to. We have a structure, looks like a little shed that we have to take, and then we would have to drain, likely have to drain this pond to install force mains right there. And we're also taking probably a lot of their existing tree buffer that they have coming down. Not ideal for this project. So alternatively, same property. We would, in order to get around this, we follow property lines on Bosco Road for a minute, follow some more property lines to get back to US 1. So we're doing this big jog out here just to get around these structures.
Can you describe real quickly the real world, like how it's going to look? Is it below ground the whole way, and it'll require trees to be cut down to put it in? And how wide is the right of way you need to do it? 30 feet. Okay. Thanks.
Here's another. Okay, so here's what it looks like if we are able to install in the right of way. We'll put it against the edge of the right of way. No impacts, obviously, to this property owner. And as you can see, there's a lot of room.
Sorry. Can they replant the trees after you put it in?
We could probably minimize the 30 foot that's needed and just have a certain minimum width for maintenance. You know, we wouldn't have to clear and maintain a full 30 feet.
Okay.
We could talk operations. Usually we'll do that through areas like this or impacts something like that where we only maintain what's really access.
Is there concerns about the roots impacting the structure?
This was another obstruction here lining where they kind of the same deal. This structure is really close to the right of way line. Not a lot of room. Looks a lot better if we're able to come inside the right of way line. Pretty self-explanatory, but why we want to do this. But we've been thinking so far that we can. So if we can't, this is the best that we can do with a traditional open cut installation of the force main. It's not hard to see this green line, green dotted line. This is our force main alignment using easements outside of the US 1 right of way. We would need approximately 30 permanent utility easements. 18 acres. And the force main length is 5.67 miles. Compared to if we stay flat to the US 1, our number of easements, this is still outside the right of way, but we're avoiding those obstacles by using a directional drill, sort of trenchless installation, where we just we drill under it. We don't open cut things, so we don't really impact the property owner or the easement. We could even get what's called a subterranean easement, where they can do whatever they want above the ground. They're just not allowed to dig or well. So these are, we think, good solutions to directionally drill under these two main structures here. That allows us to stay pretty tight to the corridor. Directional drills are a little more expensive way to install pipe. We think with the property impacts we're saving by the time the number of easements goes down to 20 from 30. Still a lot of easements. Our force main length is down close to 5 miles. One thing to note, I don't have a map for the inside, a map like this with a table for the inside of the right of way option, but it would look pretty much like this. Shift it down a little bit. We would not be getting easements. Right now, we're getting easements from all these property owners, right? We're in the right of way. We don't need any of that. Really get down to needing easements just from the pump station site to US Point, which is about 4 properties that we would use. So if we can use the DOT right away, we can get the number of easements down. So this is kind of where we are. We're at a point where we would like to appreciate direction from council on how to move forward with the force main design. We see 2 paths forward. One is to accept DOT's current position and no parallel encroachment right away and commence detailed design for the force main outside of the right of way and easements. We would still be considering a horizontal directional drill alternative as our preferred. Sorry about that. Our preferred option. But we still need 20 to 30 maybe utilities. And with that many properties, it's likely that the combination will be unavoidable. Path 2, continue to appeal DOT's decision further up the chain of command. So further appeal their decision of the chain of command. We think that we have a reasonable argument that it would really improve this project, greatly reduce the private property impacts. I think we'll call it design delays because we're at a point right now where we're ready to get into designing the project. If we choose path 1, we can go ahead and get started with our detailed design. Path 2, we're still waiting around and arguing with DOT. Who knows how long, and who knows if it will be successful. We're going to go down this path to spend half a year and path 1.
Do you have any information regarding whether the DOT, that process has been, towns have been able to build even smaller sections recently?
Yes.
So there's some precedents as well.
There is.
I mean, in different locations, I mean, we have a couple accesses inside 64, like I think our little waterway. Our water line actually goes inside the right of way there. But you have to look at it with a little bit of a different lens because 64 has driveways off of it as well as US 1 does not. Even though they're both considered kind of controlled access. Highway 70 in Kinston, I put in a very large water line in it 15, 20 years ago. But it was very politically driven. That was the largest USDA project of its kind in the US at the time. So it had a lot of political pushing to make that happen. I mean, it wasn't a little engineer calling me and saying, hey, I would like to go in your right way. They said, that's a wonderful idea. It didn't go quite that way. So One, I can't help but wonder, DOT does have a single plan for another lane in the future. They don't know when, but when I talked to, I don't remember who the individual was at this point, but their concern was that, or maybe it was email correspondence I was reading, this area is changing so much. The growth of Apex alone, and then you take Fast and you take all these other things happening. I don't know. I think DOT is a little concerned about what they may need in the future. But if you look at the corridor as it is today and what they had originally planned for 2050 or whatnot, and based on all the analysis that our consultant did from Mike and his team, there was still sufficient room for us to put our force mains in and not be any, they have basically a repose line off the edge of pavement that they don't want you to interfere with when you're trench depth back to support of the pavement. And we wouldn't even be within that of what they were proposing. But the answer at the end of the day that their team got was essentially, we don't know what we're going to do. We've got the land and it's control access, so the answer's no. And when they reached out to the division head, it literally said a hard no, I believe, in the email back and did not offer any other suggestion other than to go back to the original denial. Is that correct, Mike?
You mentioned earlier about the point up the ladder. What does that look like? And what do you mean?
Well, it's reaching out to our representatives to reach out to DOT, basically, just so they can join help. I mean, essentially. And there are some residents out there, and I do not remember the lady's name at this time, who was making a grassroots effort, I guess you would say, to get neighbors to reach out to representatives. What's the name? Judge Gear.
Can you speak to the relationship concerns?
So, yeah, so one of the reasons, staff wise, we have concerns because we have so many projects to be done in Apex. So we at staff did not want to bypass anyone that we may have to be working with one day. Because we have a lot of projects that are going to be taking place in Apex. So we want to be very careful about going over someone's head and it being pushed back down and then that creating problems for us in the future when we try to, at staff level, work with DOT employees to get projects done, whether it's 55, whether it's 64, 1010. I mean, we have a lot of projects forthcoming.
Other thing to point out, Jamie had alluded to it. If we install in easements outside of the right of way, and then they come in and take more right of way and encroach onto our force mains, at that time, they would be on the hook to move those lines.
And that's what happened at our crossing of 64 at Kelly Road. When we designed that, we purposely put it outside of the right of way, knowing that interchange probably would one day change. We didn't know yet. So we tried to make sure, we tried to stay far enough out, but they eventually did have to do a small section of it, but that was on their dime when it came through.
Other questions?
So I mean, just to make sure, I think I get it, but make sure I understand. We're looking at two pictures here, option 3, option 4. That's the difference between doing the horizontal drilling versus not, right? But they're both outside the right of way. That's assuming we don't get the DOT. That's what those two charts are.
And the shed's the structure, right? Just to clarify, or is that the horse thing? We're talking about the structure on number 1, on number 3.
There's a ring.
There's some horse rankers on.
That's the thing you're talking
But
about.
if you do under, I mean, when you say it's horizontal, is that the whole way or just in the blue areas where we're risking a structure or a big property impact.
Yeah, so these blue areas are where the obstructions are, that we would use directional drilling to go under them.
Okay. You don't want to do it the whole way. I guess it's a lot more expensive, I imagine, than just digging it up with like, okay. Did I hear you right when you're saying continue the appeal process means that the mayor or I or someone calls our state legislator or someone at DOT and says, hey, can you call someone at DOT and look into this or something? Is that what I heard?
Retaliation.
I think they're concerned. They don't want to escalate up, whereas it would basically be our job to do it.
But, okay, that's one way, but you're saying that the official way of appealing is done.
Yes.
Okay, it would just be that kind of appeal. Okay.
Is that correct, Mike? We asked for the appeal process. They provided, sent it to division engineer. We sent it, we got a response.
I'm not aware of another procedure.
Well, even if some of the elected officials try to advocate for this, is staff concerned about retaliation even if we do that, try that?
I think that's what you're saying is that if we try to go over.
Even if we do
the
it.
DOT, yeah, that's what this is where we are now, is that either you all reach out or we move forward with the other process. So our concern is that we've already reached out to, they've been talking to NCDOT staff for some time now, back since September, based on that timeline. So now we're at a point where either we're gonna move forward with the process that may impact property owners, or we need you all to engage. And our concern is that we have all these other things that are going on that may impact that.
So you're concerned about even us engaging?
Yeah,
I thought you were saying you were concerned about you engaging.
no, we've done what we can do.
You're concerned that if we engage,
Okay.
there still might be.
I see. So basically the ask is, does the staff, do we want you to pause so we could try to call up whoever? Or do you want us to just go forward and just swallow it?
And that would be the second ask, is to support the project in easements, knowing that we're gonna have at least 20 civil easements.
And that's where we're getting some community members coming to the meetings expressing concern about the impact of their property. So one of the things that we've talked about, we'll do all that we can to talk with folks. We've already been talking to community members, letting them know what our preference is, and that NCDOT is not supporting that preference.
So that they've all been informed that you've gone through this entire process through NCDOT, but denied the most common sense approach here.
I don't know if
The ones who've asked, all of it, not talk to them.
so we can
I
go
don't
back
care.
and do some
None of
engagement
us don't
there.
care about that, right? Us or DOT, they don't care, right? If we did the lot or not.
What would be a reasonable timeline if we decide as a council to move forward to try to go with the ladder? I know you said you guys are ready to vote today, but what would be a reasonable time?
So I guess.
I think, a couple of weeks actually, because it's just going to be a matter of, I think if you reach out and they say, there's too much going on, we don't know. You have to realize there is a risk for us as well. Because if we put it there and we spend all the money to put it there this year, and then fast, and, we don't know what that crystal ball looks like, but all I know is they've been building on US 1, Cary to Raleigh for the last, about 30 years. They're all the time doing something. So I don't know as Sanford takes off and Moncure and New Hill from both the apex growth and then the Moncure, that's, Denfast is just one business down there. There's others coming. And I don't know what that does. And then you have, because I think the other thing that may be playing in this is you got the executive airport that sits right down there in Lee County. So I'm sure somewhere the connection between there and at least wherever 540, 540's at, it will be a very looked at corridor in the future probably.
It's right here, really impacts our economic development in Apex, big time.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That, I would say that is the main. This is an option, because we can start right now. We start on top of the side. I like to think that we would have a good chance at swaying DOT, but it's just a thing. It would take a lot of pressure.
What has been your response to the neighbors that you all have talked to? I'm concerned about the impact.
Negative.
Anybody?
I've spoken to a number of them. Most of them just want to understand. When we explained it, where we are now is just surveying part of the work. That usually calms down a little bit. But yeah, there's some that immediately, you're stealing my land. How dare you? But it's a broad spectrum. We try. I speak to any of them that call and I explain.
And it's clear that we're talking about an easement that's adjacent to the property line by US 1, as opposed to,
Well,
or not.
now when the letters, a lot of the letters that was sent were to these. This is the route we identified in our PDO. So we sent letters to anyone along Friendship Road, Winding Way, adjacent to US 1. We sent them down Bosco Road.
Yeah, that's your option 4, right?
Yeah, all these people got letters saying that we were going to come and survey. But it's likely now that we won't have to go that way.
Yeah, because you said we'd have to clear 30 feet, cut down everything, and have to stay clear. That seems really bad. Right, especially along that route compared to going along US 1, even inside the property.
A lot of that right away US 1's probably true as well. I don't think it's clear in full, but it's a
Right, so we might be clearing and what might be an obstruction right now for their view of US 1. Yeah.
That'll be, that's just part of the negotiation process.
And for that horizontal drilling, like, do you still have to take down the trees for that too? We're gonna go deep enough that's not gonna impact them. What's the cost extra there? Would you say it's like 10 times per?
So I would say open cut is probably in the $250 to $300 per foot. For this project, if we drill it, it's probably $1,500 per foot, $1,200 to $1,500.
A little less than 10 times.
But it allows you saving
Getting a structure might be cheaper.
0.7 miles.
Yeah.
That's why we chose those couple places, because think about the costs associated with draining a pond, or whether it's temporarily drained or permanently drained, and then moving the horses out of the horse farm during construction, and building the rink, whatever it's called, back, moving the shed. I mean, those costs add up pretty quick. So, those are kind of no brainer. Let's drill through this area and keep on moving. But I think if we're talking about drilling more than what's necessary, then the costs are going to get out of hand pretty quick.
Is it something that we can use in negotiating easements to say, well, okay, we have an easement, but we'll do horizontal underground drilling, to not remove the trees that obstruct the view out your kitchen window or something. Be 100 feet there.
That would not be an economical, efficient way of doing it. You wouldn't want to use directional drilling unless it really is to save a structure or constructability. I mean, some of these places, like, be clear, we would not take our line and go under a structure, under a building. We're talking about this being the building and us being so close to it that we can't make the excavation without impacting the building. So then in that case, we would be possibly could bore past or directional drill past that structure. But the physical pipe itself would not be under the structure.
Can we debate, I think maybe we should debate 4 verse 3 first, and then debate about the getting higher ups involved. And the way, maybe I could, am I correct in summarizing that 3 has fewer, impacts fewer people, but more severely? The impacts are more severe to the fewer people. Is that, can you describe it that way? Is that correct?
I think it impacts costs probably more than
Well, okay.
blue areas. If we're drilling, we're just getting a subterranean easement. They can do whatever they want to with the land other than dig for drill. So we're spending more money, but where those blue areas are, there's virtually no lasting impacts to those projects.
Other than tree buffer, I mean, this is a, I think Diane knows a little bit, this is buffer. They're not going to build a house or a structure or anything like that within what we would be taking.
How wide of an easement are y'all taking?
Most of us are
30 feet. Yeah, I mean, it'll be fine because we have a requirement for 10-foot minimum buffer, so 30 feet of 50 or 30 feet of 100. It's not going to be land they could have used for anything anyway.
But just the trees gone. Yeah, I know.
And a lot of the reason we have buffer for along these limited and controlled access highways, we know DOT is going to lighten them in the future. 10-foot minimum buffer.
Because I personally think affecting fewer people is more important than the severity of the impacts. Personally. I'd rather make fewer people mad because they're going to be a pretty high level of mad regardless, I think. If it's condemnation especially. I'd rather deal with fewer of them. Personally.
Some of these impacts look pretty bad in their plan 4, where, look at that guy by Bosco Road. Is that Bosco? Yeah, if we're going up the whole, like 2 or 3 sides of their entire property is gonna be now a 30-foot clear path. That seems kind of bad. So I don't like option 4 at all. Like, I think we should do what it takes to stay along US 1. Is there a possibility for like a hybrid model with DOT where we, get in the right of way at a couple places and not necessarily the whole line, but can we get to here, the blue areas? So like, listen, it would save us, $100,000 or $50,000 or whatever, if we could just bump into the right of way for.
I think that's a wonderful idea. No, there's no but to it. I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what we thought would be our next task. But we still think they should let us in the whole way.
Okay.
So I've been hesitant to ask for, small pieces because then the entire length is off the table. But yeah, that's a great idea. It would save us those directional drill costs. For sure.
I mean, ultimately, what I think the ask is the designers at a point they need to move forward. So we don't want to spend money on something we know council is not willing to support, not the way they would like to go. If they would say, we would like to stay along that US corridor to the maximum extent practical, then our designer can start laying that out and have all the design. They can know exactly, what the instructions are going to be, exactly where there would be either an issue to need to directional drill or maybe jut out into in some cases, it may not even be to get out into it. It may be putting one force main in these really tight areas instead of having it 10 feet off the right of way, put it on the right of way. It's on the right of way. So our ask then is you're giving us some temporary easement. Take down your fence, do the construction, and then we'll build you a new fence. That type thing. But we don't have enough data our designers don't have enough information to be able to get to that level of detail to come back to Mike's team and say, we can do this, but boy, it would be great for this 200 feet if we could jump inside the right of way just a little bit. And there's a couple of places where the right of way actually is not consistent with US 1. It actually jumps out another 15 or 20 feet. I definitely think in those areas, I mean, you think they're going to jog the road out a little bit wider for some odd reason. I mean, in those areas, I think definitely, if it happens to correspond to an area we need it, there's one right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why we would have to go up and around, but obviously if they go the road, they're going to be following dot to dot, yellow line right there that's parallel to the road. So, so those are the things though that you don't get to until you get a final design up to your elbows, right? So I think, if we know that's the route we want to go, I think Mike and them could work with the consultant to get that. Is that accurate, Mike?
So it sounds like we will proceed with the just outside the right of way alignment and maybe even have further discussions with DOT on those short segments where I think we're planning on doing this.
That would be my preference too, is attempting that and negotiating with those little pieces here and there.
So do,
I think if we go to DOT, it's about a concept and plan that's more powerful than a concept. Because a concept, I can draw a line across anything, right? It looks great on a piece of paper, but it may not be buildable. So, so when we're talking concepts with them, when we haven't really dug into the details, it's hard for them to really put a lot of effort into it. But if we go to them with a design that they can see as a survey, here it is, and this is our impact, this is where we need to go, I think that's more powerful.
and are we suggesting this is still just staff to staff, not no ladder escalation yet from us for the alternative here?
You're always free to call anyone you would like.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm saying, and I mean that in a sense, if you wanted to have a conversation about your concern, not, it doesn't have, just a conversation.
And respectfully, we don't want to get in the way either. We want to be helpful where we can be, but we also don't want to provide a roadblock anywhere either. And that's my concern is staff to create a roadblock.
That's not suggest letting us get a little further on with the design, so we have very specific asks and maps where we want our
Talking about
short stretches
something else.
and I'd ask staff can approach DOT first with that, like kind of a different ask and see where it goes. And at that point, we decide again whether we want to escalate.
If they say no, then we do that horizontal drilling is the option.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, one of the points talking was like, walk 200 feet to not have to horizontal drill. Maybe not even have to put some trees, we can go out in some places.
But I guess my question was, so you're basically saying if they say no to the next step, what they plan on doing, you don't want to go up, you just want to go with this.
I don't think I'm saying that, no. I'm just talking it out right now.
Okay.
I know what I'm saying.
Revisit it.
Yeah,
I
I think
think,
if we get in, we revisit, talk about it again.
I mean, that is an easier ask, right? Like what we're saying right now is our staff is asking us like, hey, if you're gonna do something, you gotta do it now. We're gonna pause and wait for you to tell us when we can just get on with this thing. But the other option is go ahead with the design and then come back perhaps with a set of smaller asks to DOT to say, hey, okay, forget the whole way. This section here, this section here, this section here makes a lot of sense because of these sort of circumstances in this area, and maybe either DOT might agree to that, or at that point we can call someone and say, hey, we're looking for, 200 feet here, 10 feet inside the right of way.
We can identify those 3 areas and have it all.
Yep. It needs also to provide the email to the residents that have been trying to pull together. If you can provide that, and then everybody said just so they knows who they're contacting. So if they get, if the residents contact someone, that someone may contact you all. So that at least you have a heads up about who's contacting what's about it.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it sounds like the decision we might be about to make today is we're gonna give direction to go a route that's entirely along US 1, just outside the right of way versus inside of it. So that would sort of eliminate a lot of the residents who were potentially impacted by the previous route, which juts out in several locations into neighborhoods. And now we're saying we'll be talking to it's right here, I guess, 30 versus 20 residents would be impacted. So that'd be a meaningful change that I think people might have to contemplate based where they are.
Which may be helpful to those residents to reach out and say, yes, we support this direction and the council wants to go.
And I think it also should be made clear to anyone watching this later, when we're talking to them, we're still talking about design of the thing, right? Like this is just about the blueprints for it. We're not going to go out today or tomorrow or next year even and start digging. This is just getting the design ready for someday when this expansion happens.
Are we estimating this?
That's what I was gonna say, what's the time estimate for this, what are you thinking?
It's about a 1-year design.
I don't have it in front of me. We should have 30% design plans by September. 100% next spring, I believe.
At 100% by May of next year. And then once we get 100% design, it'll all depend on easement acquisitions and that kind of thing.
Well, there's a bigger discussion there is how are we going to fund the 25 to 30 million or whatever for doing it? Who's going to pay for it?
To me, it's about that. That's.
We've been in conversations about how we can do that. Yep, yeah.
All right. Make a motion.
Sure. I move to direct staff to pursue option 3.
All right, got a motion.
My second.
Second, so. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Hammond.
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Take a short break. 15 minutes. Recess to 5.
I think you got it.
One, maybe
Daniel, y'all do.
And then we'll have to vote in this session and then we'll have to join another one.
Okay, very good. All right, so we're about to enter the closed session and like I have a motion for the closed session this time. But,
I'll make that motion.
right, motion, Mayor Pro Tem. Second, so. Mayor Pro Tem Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Deanna.
Aye.
Councilmember Gray.
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings. All right, motion passes. We'll move to the closed session.
Want to make sure it's live to adjourn.
That doesn't happen, right?
Is that it? That's not it?
Oh, he's there. We're good.
It's good?
Yeah.
Good. All right. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Fisher.
Brandon, just close it out.